Hello and welcome to the Admin Bar, the community and podcast connecting the people with the products, lessons, and strategies to help push their business forward. My name is Kyle Van Duzen, and with me, as always, is my good friend and co-host Matt Siebert from Matthew Siebert Design. How's it going today, Matt?
It's going well. Better than my neighbors, actually. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning a couple of days ago to their house on fire. So that was interesting. So running on a bit of lack of sleep, catching up there, but otherwise my house is standing. So I
Yeah,
think
that's a
I'm
good
in the
thing.
positive here.
I definitely just pictured you outside with the garden hose, like spraying your own house down so it didn't burn along with it. But yeah, that's not a good start to anybody's morning.
No, it is not. It's actually it's being investigated as arson. Like
Uh-oh.
there's just never a dull moment over this way.
Yeah, you said that probably wasn't the best house in the neighborhood, so
It was like the not good house in the neighborhood. Everybody else is great. My neighbors to every other direction, like wonderful people, like retirees, like they're great. But this one particular house, the bane of everybody's existence, is gone. So that's kind of weird.
yeah. Well, hopefully everybody got out all right.
They did.
All right, so let's talk about burning down our agencies. Today we're
By
going to talk.
ignoring red flags.
Yeah, today I posted in the group the other day. We talk about like red flag stuff all the time, but I posted in the group the other day, like, what are your green flags? What are the things that clients can do or say that make you think, hey, this is somebody I definitely want to work with? So me and Matt both made a list of kind of our green flags, our red flags, and the yellow flags, the things that kind of make you need to be a little cautious. So we're going to run through all those. It's not an exhaustive list of every possibility, but kind of some of the things we look at and take a look at some of those. So I do want to say before we jump into that, if you're not a part of our group, we would love to have you. You can go to the adminbar.com/group. There's about 5,000 plus WordPress professionals in there sharing tips and strategies and lessons and all kinds of fun stuff. So we would love to have you there. You can also just browse around our website, theadminbar.com. You'll find notes to this episode, past episodes, tons of articles, private job board, link to subscribe to our newsletter, all kinds of good stuff. The community was voted the #1 WordPress community lately. So I do like to promote that. We'd love to have you in there. And I do want to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, the Content Lab.
The Content Lab provides reliable, white label content writing services for digital agencies and their clients. Whether it's content strategy, website copy, lead magnets, blogs, or even email marketing and newsletters, the Content Lab has you covered. Now, I've been working personally with Abby and her team for well over a year now, and what I like best is the complete peace of mind I have when I send a project her way. I know I won't be waiting ages for clients to send copy, and I know the copy my clients get will be perfectly formatted for the web, optimized for search engines, and conversion focused. Now, if you're struggling with copy, then I would suggest you head on over to thecontentlab.ie. Yes, they are Irish, and let Abby know we sent you. I think you'll be as surprised as I was at just how affordable it is, and I know you'll be blown away with their work.
All right, so let's dive in here, Matt. I think what we'll do is we'll start with the red flags. We'll talk about those first. Then we'll move to the green flags, and then we'll kind of find where that in between is with the yellow flag. So let's take a look at your list first. What are those red flag things that make you think I am never ever working with this person?
Absolutely. The first one is just I'm going to start out kind of with a low ball, and maybe it's just personal to me, and it might just be griping. But when someone initially contacts me and they're writing in all caps, I typically just don't respond to those types of emails. I don't need to be yelled at.
Yeah, I wonder. I imagine anybody under a certain age probably does like uses all caps on purpose for a reason. I do think there's an older generation that probably just like doesn't know where the caps lock button is on their keyboard, so they just go with it. But yeah, that's definitely a red flaggy thing right there, because if they don't know how to turn caps lock off, or if they're just purposefully doing that, probably not a great customer to work with.
Exactly. You're either shouting at me or you're giving me a pretty strong indication that if I did move forward, the communication and just the progress in the work would probably take longer than is necessary.
Yeah, ain't nobody got time for that.
Heck no. Moving on to the second is one of two: either telling me how long something's going to take or how easy it's going to be. Now, you do have some of those clients that are fairly well versed or educated as far as the design process goes, but everybody has a different method. Everybody's got a different tech stack. And to have a client say, "Oh, it's only going to take 5 minutes," or "Oh, this is super easy, just whip this out," that gets under my skin. And those are the types of clients that I don't like working with. So if this is an initial request, I'm not going to work with you. I know exactly how this is going to go. I know what future projects are going to look like. No, thank you. You can find somebody else.
And not to mention when somebody says this is going to be easy or this is going to be quick, they also, what they're implying is this isn't going to cost very much, so they're kind of dictating all those terms up front. And sometimes, to be fair, sometimes jobs are easy and quick, but let's talk about the job first before we decide what's easy and quick, because there's, I did a call yesterday with a client who, he's an existing client. He wants to add some stuff to his website, but he's super non-techie at all. But at first it started out this was going to be super easy and quick. And then it turned into, maybe we just need to build a whole new website. And then we got on the phone. I'm like, we just need to get on a call and talk. So we jumped on a Zoom call and talked it through. It did end up being the earlier version that was easy and quick, but clients don't really always know. So yeah, that's definitely one that if I see somebody say that to me, I definitely have my senses up.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, in most cases, actually, from what I've experienced, is it's typically not easy and it's typically not quick. Like the ones that do say that are not the ones that are like, I'm not sure if this is going to be feasible or this, that, and the other thing, and they caveat it. In many cases, those are easy, and it's just like that weird disconnect between the two.
Yeah, I got one that kind of on my list that kind of fits into this, so I'll shoehorn it in here. But people say, you ask them the timeline on the project and they say, I want to have it done yesterday. Oof, that's a personal pet peeve. I do not want to hear that. I'm fine with as soon as possible. That's kind of generic. Everybody wants something as soon as it can be done, as long as it's reasonable. But if they just start off saying, I need this done yesterday, like, I'm not interested.
Yeah, and there's a pretty big distinction between I need this yesterday or as soon as possible. I mean, if I'm not versed in something, like I don't know, I'm hiring some folks to tear down and put up a brand new fence around my yard. I'm not sure how long that takes, but I'd like it to be done as soon as possible, and I'm kind of just saying, like, I want this done, like, sooner rather than later. You tell me what that sooner is, versus, right. If I were to hire them and reach out and be like, I want this done yesterday. And like, that's two different type of people. And the one that you're talking about those are the people that you really don't want to work with.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's definitely one that gets me going.
Absolutely. Now, Kyle, have you ever been on a call with a client or emailing back and forth, and they're complaining about their previous designers, and they're saying that every designer that they've worked for was terrible or a pain, or they ghosted them? What do you pick up from that?
Yeah, and this is one I had on my list too. I put this into my yellow flag list, but I think there's an important distinction with what you said. If they talk about every developer they've worked with or every designer they've worked with, then yeah, it's not every developer and designer. It's you, buddy, and I'm not interested. So definite red flag. Now, there are some people that just say the last person I worked with, I think we've all heard that, the last person I worked with disappeared, this or that. For me, that's a cautionary thing. That's a yellow flag, because I'm going to go, okay, well, is it the past developer who just sucked and is what it is, and this customer's fine? That's possible. Is it that the last developer realized that this person's crazy and decided they didn't want to work with them? That's also possible. So it's kind of one of those things that when I hear somebody complaining about the person they worked with previously, it's definitely getting my attention. But it's going to depend on how they say it and how the context around it, whether that's going to be a yellow flag or a green flag. But if it's everybody I've worked with in the past is terrible, then it's not everybody, it's you.
Absolutely. Skipping over to this one, doesn't want to pay a down payment. Ooh. Like, I've gotten that before, or they have a very specific way that they want to pay you, and it's outside of your norm. As I'm like reading this, as I'm talking about this, I'm now thinking maybe this is more of a yellow flag. I have bent for a few clients in the past. I've noticed, the bigger the client you get, the longer the net is, there's things that you do sometimes want to change or have to change for specific clients. There's one that I'm thinking of in particular that everything was a green flag. The only difference was that they didn't want to pay me via the way, I use Square. So they didn't want to do that. Instead, they sent a totally foreign third-party payment system that like linked up to my bank. And, I went to the website and it looked old and weird. And like, I just got the heebie-jeebies from it. I did a lot of research on it before I ended up saying yes. But, I asked people on Reddit or looked through forums and everything, and it was legit and it was fine. And in that case, I did say yes. It was a larger project. That's just how this particular company does things. But in most cases, and if they weren't going to do a down payment, I wouldn't have worked for them. But like that's touch or go. I don't know. Like, what do you think on that one, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever had somebody just balk at paying a deposit. There's just so much work that goes up front. I think people generally seem to understand that. Now, I would say, and this is kind of related, like if they want you to like prove yourself to them first, like do this or that, and then we'll get started. I'm not doing any of that. Like, I'm not doing spec work for
like
people.
Scope or not. What is that?
Like spec work for people on
yes,
stuff.
That's what it is. Spec work.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. Not unless I will say I have done that on my own volition when I thought, I really want this job and I have a cool idea, and I've sent over ideas on stuff. And I did that a lot more earlier in my career than I do now. But yeah, if somebody just asks for that, then who knows where that stops with them asking for things. So that's definitely a red flag.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit safer when you approach them with that idea, especially if you're just starting out. Like, you do need some sort of a proof. Like, you don't have a large portfolio, you don't have much proof on your website. I can see doing that, but when they come to you, that's when your red flag warning signals should be going off. All right, so this one I've seen quite a bit. Requiring meetings of multiple staff members to make any sort of forward progress. This typically is the older generations that, every time you send out a proof, it's, hey, let's schedule a Zoom call. We'll all sit down. We'll all talk about it. We'll all make decisions. That impedes my progress. And honestly, it impedes the progress of the entire project. Like if we work together and we have the, that group, they have their meeting and they bring that to me, that's totally okay. But when you have to take those breaks and, they're half an hour, 45 minutes, even an hour sometimes out of your day, that gets annoying, to say the least.
Yeah. And, when you get to bigger organizations too, that does seem to be a problem where, they have to have some kind of committee. So people complain a lot about nonprofits and stuff like that, where it has to be decision by committee. I definitely think, and I know everybody says this, so I'm not saying anything new here, but making sure you know who the decision maker is and that you're working with the decision maker is so important. I actually prefer when the person I'm working with isn't the owner of the company. When the money's coming out of the person's wallet that I'm talking to, it's a lot harder to get the money out of their wallet.
Right.
So if somebody's trying to get me to buy something, it's definitely hard because I have to open up my wallet and pay for that. So I really rather deal with somebody in the organization that's not the owner, but they have to have decision-making abilities. Like they have to have the authority to say yes or no on things. Because if they're just playing the middleman role of like running it up the flagpole, everything we do, that just slows down the process so much. So you definitely have to be talking with the person that can make decisions. And I know I have a nonprofit that I've done work with since before I started my agency, and they have lots of people there. Everybody gets a say. And I understand that. And there's a lot of people involved and a board that has to, make sure all these decisions are what they want for the future of the organization. And I have contacts with lots of the people there, but there's only one person I deal with on projects. Like I communicate with her. She goes back and feeds it to the team. She comes back with all the feedback gathered together in one cohesive thing and gives it to me. And that makes it doable if you know that situation going in,
Right. Now, was that a situation that you had set up? Was that your idea with these folks, or did they broach that with you?
Yeah, it I think it kind of happened organically. Maybe there was a time when I said something about it, but there was no like come to Jesus meeting or anything like
Mhm.
that. But it has been a lesson going forward. If I do know there is a committee or something that I'll just bring up, I need one point of contact for all these things. Uh, so that definitely makes it easier. But they've been very understanding about that. I think most people get that too. They, you know, Bigger agencies probably deal with this on the reverse end when they have a client and they have like the content team and the design team and
Right.
the development team and all the marketing team and all this. They probably have some kind of project manager that's overseeing all of it and communicating with the client, and not each individual team like starting the entire process over. So I don't think anybody wants to deal with that. It just makes things so much easier and cleaner if there's less people communicating.
Absolutely. Speaking of something else that nobody wants to deal with, and I know that I think you more than I have gotten these emails where you get contacted and they say that they want to make the next Amazon, they want to make the next eBay, or they want to make an eBay that's also Amazon, that's also iTunes, right? I remember several stories that you've brought to me with just these wild ideas and a budget of $550.
Yeah, if they're trying to make the next whatever, that their budget is zero. Like they
Right.
never have money to do these things. Yeah, I've had probably, I don't know, half a dozen of those calls or inquiries where, it's always the worst when they want to combine the two different things, because really they literally just want to take the two things and mash them together and call it their own thing for $500. And yeah, I'm not interested in those projects whatsoever.
And like having like lofty ambitions is not a bad thing. Like I love clients that have lofty goals, but they need to be rooted in some sort of reality. I wonder if like those those commercials that you see for Wix or Weebly or whatever, if they have like some sort of a causality to this, because all of those websites are like make beautiful designs in 5 minutes and you're up and running and blah blah blah. Like I think that for the layman, it is a quote simple thing, if you don't do any sort of research prior to reaching out to a web developer.
I'm just waiting for the next Wix commercial that says, make the next mashup of Facebook and Twitter on Wix
Right.
for just $10 a month.
Oh man, I mean, I'd do it. The next one is probably a little bit more personal. It's just something that as I've been in business and as the years have gone by, this in particular, this like way some people reach out to me, I get a bad vibe. I've worked with these types before, and like again, I feel like weird that I'm kind of like making this a very broad statement, but when the email starts with hey buddy or hey friend, hey pal, and I've never met this person before, I get really bad vibes. And again, I think that's just because I have said yes to these folks, and overly friendly people, it just doesn't work out. Most of the time, they end up being controlling and don't want to spend money.
It's interesting. I start a lot of conversations with "Hey, buddy." I don't know why. It's just been all a natural thing I've done, but usually not with strangers. So
No,
I can
like I
see
mean,
there's
if you were to like contact a landscaping company via email, would you start it like, "Hey, buddy, would you like to do my lawn?" Like it sounds cringy to me.
yeah. Well, now you're gonna have me second thinking every time I write that out. But yeah, not to a stranger. I think to a stranger that's weird. I haven't noticed those kind of inquiries coming in. So yeah, that's a good one.
I'm gonna hit another personal one for me, and this is more just like the types of projects that I won't work on. So like sometimes it's simply the project. Like they could be perfectly fine. In the case that I'm thinking, they probably weren't. But like ethical issues, I don't like to build sites that are like for a tobacco company, for example. And the one that I'm thinking in particular was this guy that reached out, and he had all the specs, he had all the ideas, he had like sketches, albeit they were like line art, little stick figures. But it was a board game, which I've done before, and I've had a blast, like just designing that stuff. This particular one was incredibly racist. Um, So not really a red flag, or a red flag to everyone in existence type of thing, but I just wanted to throw that in there because I just thought it was funny. Like, I don't think he's ever, made it past like actually making this thing, and God knows he didn't make like a Kickstarter or anything, but just really weird projects. I won't do those either.
Yeah, I can't think of too many that have come across my desk before, but I mean, now that my agency's busier and things, I can be a little bit more picky about the projects I take on. Definitely not doing anything racist. So that's out of the question. But yeah, I mean, there's things that even if, you know, I've done plenty of projects where I said, well, this isn't going to go in my portfolio. I'm not going to promote that I did this. But now it's like, okay, well, anytime I take something on, I'm having to say no to other things. So I want to be excited about the things I'm doing. So yeah, if it's something that's even questionable, that's definitely a no.
Yeah, just to finish that thought, like they reached out to me with like, this is what we want. It's a board game. It's going to be this size, et cetera, et cetera. And immediately after reading the description that they sent me on that first email, I knew it was racist. I knew it was terrible. But I did reach back out to them because they had mentioned that they had the sketches, and I wanted to see them. Like, I wanted to see the terribleness of it. Yeah, no, they sent them to me, and it was just as bad as I thought. Just a racist board game. Who'd have known?
Yeah, there's a market for everything.
Moving on to something that's actually a red flag is when they mention that their demographic is everybody.
Ugh. Yeah, and it seems like I asked that question too late in my process to pick up on that early enough, but that's definitely not a good thing. Anybody that's that underprepared or that clueless about business is going to be difficult to work with. Water, everybody drinks water. I'm trying to think of things that are for everyone, but like not everybody's going to buy a brand of bottled water. So
right,
even
like some
that's not going to
people
work.
drink water, they just don't like water.
Yeah. So I can't think air, oxygen. People like oxygen, but we're not really buying that.
I do love
So
oxygen.
yeah, I think there's very few things that are going to apply to everyone. So if you think that, you haven't really thought realistically about your business yet, and that's going to make it a tough thing, especially if you're doing any kind of marketing with them. And we have so much crossover between web design and development and marketing, and some marketing you can't help but do as you develop a website, even if you're not charging for marketing. And it makes it really hard to know who you're building for if that answer is everyone.
Right. And unfortunately, like typically with projects like that, you aren't building it for everyone. You're building it for that particular client, that one person. They're the ones that are going to be making decisions that affect their website, and they're going to be making it from a place like from themselves rather than thinking of the clients that they're trying to attract. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you like your website. It matters if the buyers do.
Right. Yeah, that can be a hard one to get through people's skulls sometimes too.
It really is. And then moving on to my last one, and this one's kind of like a trap, like a red flag trap that I set for potential bad clients. And that's just a very brief project discovery form that I send them. Typically, somebody reaches out and I say, hey, thanks for reaching out. I'd love to learn a little bit more. The best first step is to fill out this discovery form. It's very short. It'll only take a couple of minutes, but it gives me more information so that when we do have our phone call, I'll be better prepared. The people that don't fill those out, or almost worse, the ones that they open up the form, they start doing it, and then it kind of peters out and they just give like one-word responses, or they just don't take it seriously. Those immediately I don't work with.
Yeah, and I think it is good to have some kind of like pre-qualifiers like that. And an inquiry form is an easy way to do that, to kind of suss these people out, because you do get lots of interesting responses. I think there is like this balance though between making it easy and realistic for somebody to make an inquiry. Like, none of us are like the god of web design where we could ask people to jump through a million fiery hoops to work with us. But there should be some, at least warm hoops they have to jump through. But at the same time, you want to make it somewhat approachable. So I've tried to balance that a little bit by having like a mix of multiple choice questions, which are real easy for anybody to follow, and then some like text answers where they have to fill in, and you can gather a lot from those text answers, how much they've thought about something, or if they have a really good idea on what they're trying to do. But yeah, that's a great way to pre-qualify them. And the ones that just breeze through it really quickly, it's going to be trouble getting content from them and making decisions and things like that, because they obviously don't have time to be bothered with any of that.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. You just know that the working with them is going to be pulling teeth.
Yeah, I got a couple of red flags on here to add before we move on. So one is asking for discounts right away, or really at any time, but asking for discounts to me is a red flag. Sometimes I do offer some kind of discount. If you do this and this, I can knock a little bit off or whatever, but just coming straight out of the gate asking for discounts, then I know they're just worried about the price, and I know they're just going to try to beat me down on everything. Because I've heard, I can't remember, I'd like to attribute it to the right person, but somebody had said, I don't give discounts to new clients, I give discounts to existing clients. And I think that's the way it should be, because if you give it to the new client, you're kind of setting this precedent for, well, just always ask Kyle for a discount because he'll just give you one, you know? So I think it is better to save those discounts for existing customers rather than new inquiries. So that's definitely one that if they start asking for that, I'm getting my red flag out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Does that do it for your list, or you got more red flags?
So I would say anybody who wants to like really circumvent your processes, and this is hard to suss out early in the beginning, but the project inquiry form is a good example. If they won't go through that, then they're going to be really difficult to work through all those processes. But even like, I want to have Zoom meetings with people. I don't want to meet them in person if they're local, because I don't.
Right.
And I prefer not to do the phone, just because I think you get so much more out of seeing somebody and interacting with them on Zoom than you do over the phone. But if they won't book a Zoom meeting, or they, we have to do it on the phone or whatever it may be, any of those things that like they don't want to follow your lead on how this is done, to me, that's always a red flag of like, okay, there's going to have to be a lot of good about this job for me to go along with that. And the other thing is like unreliable communication, which I think we touched on a little bit, but if they send you an email, an inquiry or whatever, you reply to them and then it takes 6 days to hear back and they're in a hurry. Like, when can we get this started? Like I don't want to deal with like, I don't expect everybody to answer their email immediately, but we need to have some kind of rhythm to the communication, or I know it's going to be really tough. And then the last one is, it kind of goes along with your telling you something's going to be easy or quick, or that just in general telling you how things need to be done. So it gets difficult with people who are really familiar with the work we do, because even if there's not a right way and wrong way, there's just two different ways to do something. If they have a preconceived notion of how they want these things done and you work differently, that makes the process really hard. So for me, it makes it a little bit difficult when somebody's really, more technically inclined, where they, I would like them to have a good idea of the things we do. It's kind of straddling a fine line here, but if they've been doing this forever and they're hiring you, sometimes that can be really hard. I've also found it really difficult to work with people who are like web adjacent, but technical people. So like an IT person, like they have a lot of technical skills and know about a lot of computer things, but not what I do. And so sometimes that translation is really difficult. So, and I also feel, because I'm not a super techie person, even though I'm in a tech industry, I feel a little intimidated by those people because they're speaking in tech language that I don't understand. And I'm used to being in the position where I'm speaking in tech language and having to translate it to a client. So that makes me feel kind of uncomfortable too. So those are a couple more things that I had on my red flags list.
All right, so we'll hit the green flags, and actually some of my green flags, they are the inverse of your explanations for some of my red flags, which is funny. So start that off with that they bring up the fact that they have one point of contact for communication, like that. Absolutely, green flag all day.
Yeah, I think the only caveat to that is when you're working with the owner operator type person.
Right.
Because sometimes that's just, you're going to have the money challenge on those when it's the person running the business, operating the business, that owns the business, that's going to have to pay you and make all the decisions. Sometimes that gets a little tricky. So I've never had somebody like from a big organization say, I'm going to be your one point of contact. They've probably dealt with somebody like us before and knew that was a good in. So I've never had that happen. But, if it is owner operator type business, I think that can be yellow flag territory. But I see what you're saying with it.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. And like to expand on that, the other point that I had written down here was that the decision maker isn't the one spending their own money, but rather the business's money. And again, like that disconnect is really needed. I mean, there are plenty of business owners out there that that they understand that money is a tool more than anything, and that there's not that like special attachment that they have. But often that's not the case. So it is difficult because you're requesting them to open up their wallet and hand them money that would have otherwise fed their kids type of thing. But done right, that also means that they're going to spend that money to get more of it back. So
yeah, I don't want to have to explain that to them though.
No, I want the clients.
I'm with you. If it's somebody that's not the owner but they have decision making power, that's the best scenario. So definitely green flag on that one.
Right. And then communication, if somebody reaches out to you with an inquiry and you email them right back, and within the same day they're back with the answers that you've to the questions that you've asked, that's amazing. Like that's a pretty clear signal that this person's on it. They want to make moves and they're ready to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that seems rarer than I would like it to be. I guess I've gone out and bought things before, or like was really early in the process of trying to figure out what I needed and reached out when I really didn't have a clue of what I needed. And so that I was probably like a red flag to those people. But it is definitely nice when people have done some kind of research, have some kind of idea of what they need. They've come prepared in some kind of way. It's definitely a huge green flag in this case.
For sure. And, even if they don't necessarily have all of the answers, they're not perfect, but they've worked with web designers in the past. That's another green flag. And I know I said, the other people that are like all web designers are terrible. That's completely different. Like web designers, we all work differently, but we all work similarly. And similarly enough that if somebody's worked with web design projects in the past, chances are they understand that there's probably going to be a process. It might be different from what they've experienced in the past, but they have that example to move or like to move forward with. Yeah,
and obviously it is going to be different with everybody you work with, but I think that's fairly universally understood. But I do prefer people who have been through this process before. And I have some notes on that when we move into yellow flags too.
All right, awesome. And actually I'm on my last green flag, and it's my favorite. It's the clients that approach you and they know what their budget is and they know why their budget is what it is.
That's also a rarity, isn't it? I don't get a ton of those.
It truly is a unicorn, but when they do hit your inbox, it's just, little fireworks go off.
Yeah. And honestly, it just makes the whole thing better. Even if the budget is low, like I'd rather have a low budget, but know what the budget is to work with than have an ambiguous budget. If I know your budget's $2,500, well, then I know what I can recommend to you as a solution.
Right. And chances are that if they know what their budget is and they know why it is the way that it is, and much of that is localized to that business, and they know what they do, they don't necessarily know web. But if they do know what their business is or what their budget is, then when you come back to them and you explain, well, under this budget, we're going to have to drop some things. We're going to have to do this. Like, does it still align with your goals if we don't do these things? And often I've found that as long as they know why their budget's what it is, they can find ways to extend it, or they find ways to hit the website in phases maybe, or what, because they do have these goals. They have their reasons. And if you're able to sit down with, cold hard numbers and just say like, look, like this isn't feasible, they're much more willing to go back to the drawing board and work with you, or together with you on this budget problem.
Yeah, and it's just a part of that is just kind of reconciling their expectations with their budget, right? And
Hmm.
as long as they have a budget, you can work through all that pretty easily. But if the budget's completely ambiguous, you have no idea what it is, it's really hard to know where to start out. Like, are we talking about uh, a huge, complicated, complex, multi-layer, all kinds of third-party integrations, or are we talking about a simple little 3-page brochure website? So having some kind of idea about the budget tells me, okay, what kind of things are going to, what's going to be possible with this project? So even having a range is really helpful. And I've gone back and forth on like including asking people about their budget on my inquiry form, just with where they can type in a number. I've done a drop down where they can select some ranges, but I find most people really don't have a clue,
Nope.
so it's never been all that helpful other than, if people selected something really, really low, I would just pass on the project and tell them, here's some recommendations like Wix or Squarespace that, you could probably get done for that budget. But I've probably shortchanged myself a little bit in that I didn't go ahead and go through with the process of talking to them
Like
and,
hear them out.
helping to understand what those goals are and stuff, how they came up with that number, if there's any room for us to change things around, which maybe in some of those cases I could have got projects that I just turned away otherwise. But, it's kind of one of those decisions you have to make about how much time are you going to invest in people, to really completely qualify them out, and how quickly can you qualify out some of the little things just to keep it from being overwhelming.
Right, and there's always the thing to keep in mind that if you have to say no to a lead or that inquiry, there's always going to be follow up inquiries from other businesses. So, like I understand that there's the feast and the famine, and there's the stress of, especially if you're just starting out, to say yes to everything. But at a certain point, like, you won't need to do that anymore, and you just have to keep in mind that there will always be more inquiries coming in. Like, it might be a decent stretch in between, but eventually that evens out and it's easier to say no.
Yeah, I think that's huge. All right, well, I have a couple of green flags left on my list that you didn't bring up. I'm going to say my number one answer you didn't use, so that's pretty interesting, but I'll save that one for last. Another one I had on here was people who are more concerned with quality than cost.
Hmm.
So this isn't always one of those like binary type answers you can get from people, but you can pick up on this pretty easily with the types of questions they're asking you about. If the first question is how much does a website cost, well, they're much more worried about the cost than the quality. But if they're asking about other projects you've done, or explaining the scope of this project and how they could do things differently and all that kind of stuff, that tells you they're more worried about the outcome of this project and the quality of the work you do than the cost, that's definitely a green flag to me. Not that I want to rake them over the coals with the price. I don't honestly charge as much as a lot of other people do, but it is nice to know that, like, we're going to be working on this for the benefit of the project, not just on the budget. So that's a
Right.
huge one for me.
Yeah, and like those types also tend to stick around. Like if you do what they needed and they understand, like, oh, like hiring Kyle, we can achieve our goals, they're going to stick around for a while.
Yeah, and it's funny as we talk about all these things, the ones on my list, I almost cherry picked all of these from like specific clients. When I
Mm.
when I mentioned they're more concerned with quality than cost, I have a specific customer that comes to mind, that's exactly how that conversation went. I gave them the price. They were a little shocked at the price. We had to work on the price a little bit, but they were definitely bought in on the quality of the work and those kinds of things, and were willing to work with the budget in order to get the quality they wanted. And I definitely think, like, if we're building a pyramid, I don't want the price to be at the top of it.
Right. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense.
All right. And I think my number one green flag, it was the first one on my list. It's definitely far and above the most important to me, is people that come to me already aware of me before we start having a
Mm.
conversation. So this can be they, saw work I did, they've read some blog posts, they saw a video I did, they saw some of my work and found my link in the footer, whatever it may be. Uh, Sometimes this can be referrals, although referrals get a little bit tricky.
Mhm.
But I know if somebody's coming to me for a reason, they're going to be probably a lot better of a client and easier to work with than somebody who just picked me out of a hat, essentially. And I think about this a lot with, like, I've done all the local SEO stuff. Like if you type in website design Granbury, Texas, my name comes up everywhere. But if somebody's only contacting me because I'm in the same town as them, that's not enough for them to pay me more than the next guy or trust me more than somebody else. And if there's none of that built in, it's always going to be about price. It's always going to
Right.
be a race to the bottom dollar. So for me, content's a huge part of like my marketing, is creating all kinds of content and stuff. So I think about like the clients who have came in, they said, hey, I was trying to do X, Y, and Z. I started researching. I came across your article. I decided, you know what, this guy already knows how to do all this. I'm just going to reach out to him and find out how much it costs. That's a great lead.
Heck
Like,
yeah.
because you've already like qualified yourself to them. You're not having to sell yourself to them. And there was a comment in the group the other day when somebody posted, I wish I would have brought it up for this, I just thought of it. It said like, if you're in a meeting with a prospect and they ask like, why should we choose you? And I just thought, ew, that's a red flag
Gross.
to me. Like if somebody said that to me, I'd be like, ooh, I'm not into this at all. And I think that's because I try to do so much work to qualify myself before they even reach out to me. And that's my preferred path into me, is through some kind of connections they have, work that I've done, content that I've created. So they're familiar with me or my work before we ever have any contact. So that's always a huge green flag to me. The number one green flag for me.
Yeah, and the more I think about it while you were talking, like I haven't gotten one of those, and I'm trying to think like how I would respond, and like it's really hard because no, I'm like you came to me, right? Like if I came to you, then yeah, I need to prove myself possibly, but that just like I don't think of I can't think of a good way to respond to that really, aside from just saying, hey, this isn't gonna work out.
Yeah, just it's another good reason not to do in-person meetings, because you just have
You
to
just
quietly
get up
back
and
out of
walk
the room.
away.
So, all right. Well, that wraps up the green flags. Let's the in between things. I think the yellow flags are the things that aren't necessarily bad and aren't necessarily good on their own, but they could be bad or they could be good. It's just those things that when they happen, you need to be aware of them so you can try to figure out, okay, is this a bad sign or is this okay? It's just a particular reason for this. So let's hear these yellow flags you have.
Okay, so typing in all caps is a red flag for me. However, a yellow flag would be poor grammar or punctuation in those emails. Just like a single run-on sentence of like just massive paragraph. I can't work with folks like that, or at least I have a very hard time. So it's a yellow flag. If there's enough green flags in that project, then I might look into it a little bit further. But it's something that gets my spidey senses tingling.
Yeah, and I mean, there's obviously a spectrum to all that, right? If they like don't use an Oxford comma, I'm not gonna like kick them out
No.
for not doing that. But if like everything in the email is really poorly written, that's definitely yellow flag. I mean, there could be reasons for that. Some people have learning disabilities, or it could be a number of things. Younger people are just used to texting all the time, and in texting you just don't worry that much about like punctuation and grammar and things like that. You do it quickly. So maybe somebody younger is just more used to typing that way, and it's a more less professional, quick, easy, familiar way to communicate. So I think that's worthy of a yellow flag. That's something to look out for. And especially we've had people in the group, I've gotten emails, people that type in that like one thought, but it's 400 words and there's a million commas and no periods. The reason I think that is so dangerous is because if somebody types like that, somebody thinks like that, and somebody talks like that, and it's just so hard to like get any solid thoughts out of somebody. And I feel like as I've started saying this exact explanation has been a bunch of commas and no periods. So I'm going to shut up now.
But like that's part of it too. I think like some people work with people like that and like do it well, and I think because so much of business relationships is vibing with the other person and like getting along. Maybe you're not friends, maybe you're not going to go out for a drink or whatever, but there needs to be some sort of I don't know, like vibe between between myself and my client. If we don't like each other, then it's not going to work. And I think that this is just one of those like a Turing test of sorts to see whether or not we're going to work well together. And I'm
Yeah, and
not
I
saying that I need emails that are written, like the 14th century poets or anything like that. Like, I don't need my dearest Matthew. Like, no, but coherent and not rushed.
Yeah, and I definitely have clients that aren't my favorite people in the world, and it does make for a harder, like long-term relationship too, because just when they send in support request type things or changes to their website, I'm just kind of like, ugh, I really don't want to deal with this person right now, you know?
Right. So number 3 kind of bleeds into a point that I expanded on, so I'm not really going to say much about it, but just the inability or unwillingness to adhere to my process. It could be a red flag, it could be a yellow. It really depends on what portions that they're struggling with and what the alternative method is.
Yeah, that's definitely case by case basis.
For sure. Another one that's a yellow flag. It can be great. It can be horrible. Is first-time website owners. There's a lot of education at play there. I feel like it was easier for me to take on these folks in the beginning of my business because I had the time to like individually train these clients on processes and everything that they need on their side of things. And it's a yellow flag mainly because some of my best clients have come out of this situation. They just started their business. They just, they need everything. And I've branded businesses. I've built their websites. I've done a bunch of their print marketing, all from day one. And these 2 clients that I'm thinking of in particular are 2 of my absolute favorites, and they've been with me for over a decade, like from the very birth, the conception of their business, all the way 10 years later, where they're thriving. And they're actually one of my clients, Jack's Crackers. If they're around you, check them out. They're delicious. But like these guys, they just won Best of New Hampshire award, for baked goods. Like that's killer. Like I love that, and I love my clients. So sometimes getting in on the ground floor is just, it's opening up like just years long relationship that's going to be awesome. On the flip side of that, then we start getting into the red flags as well. And if there's too many red flags coupled with the very first website, it's just going to be an absolute disaster from day one.
Yeah, and I'm definitely less likely to take on projects where it's their first website at this point too.
Mm-hmm.
And for all those reasons, there's going to be like bad expectations or no expectations at all, or no idea how any of this works, and it just does take so much more work. Now, it can end up okay if they have all other green flags and this one yellow flag, then it's probably okay. But it's definitely one of those where if that's coupled with a red flag, I'm probably out, because it's not that they're necessarily bad and they might be great clients. I just don't have time for that where I'm at right now, So there's definitely a market out there, and there's a lot of people that like working with those clients
and
because they can
with those
all
clients.
those things. Yeah. But it's definitely not one that I get excited about.
Not anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, not anymore.
And then my last yellow flag is similar to the first one. Businesses that are just opening, that have been in operation for under a year or so. They typically have small budgets, and I guess that's kind of the crux of this point here, is that small budgets oftentimes lead to controlling behavior, because that's all the money that they have, so they want to make sure that it's spent as perfectly as possible, and it tends to lead to scope creep.
Yeah, and I've definitely found people with bigger budgets are easier to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's just people that have been doing this longer have bigger budgets and they have more realistic expectations, because I think my most difficult clients were the ones that had really tiny budgets and really huge expectations on what could be done with it. So that's definitely one for me as well. All right. Well, I got a couple more yellow on here. I think one we touched on here was when they tell you about bad experiences with past developers.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think that's one where, we're going to have to dig into that a little bit and find out.
Right.
The other one I have on here is people that come to you thinking a website, I'd put this in the terms of it's going to save them. And this could be a lot of different things. Like, this is going to keep my business from closing. That would be a really giant red flag for me. But even people that think like, I need a website because as soon as I get a website, I'll be on the first page of Google and then I'll have lots of sales. Like, this will make my business work. Websites can do a lot of things and they can help businesses tremendously, but very few of those things are like completely transformative from day one of launch. I don't think any of them are from day one of launch. You know, it's a long ongoing process to get a website to do everything you need to do with it, right? So anybody who thinks that, you know, they just need the website so everything else will be fine and be perfect, that's usually a yellow flag to me. We need to talk about like expectations on Google and conversions and e-commerce, all, you know, whatever the project may be all about. But that's definitely one that makes me a little worried.
And typically, from my experience, also, those are the types of clients that want like a set it and forget it solution. And, you know, you tell them like, look, we can build the website, but you need to make some, you know, effort to funnel people to it. You need to generate content, you know, like all of these things that are after the site's built. Most of those clients just, they don't want to, you know, and they make the excuse that they don't have the time or they don't, like, you know, but that's not neither here nor there. It's just, it's doomed to fail from the start if they're not willing to continue to like, you know, grow their website.
Yeah. And what I've kind of told clients that think that way, or I'm afraid they're thinking that way, what I've kind of told them in the past is like, a website is part of your marketing, but it's not marketing on its own, right? You can't just build it and they will come. Like, it has to have some kind of strategy on like, okay, how are we going to get traffic? Maybe that's organic search results and they have something unique and people know it. Maybe people already know their brand and they're just looking for it online. Maybe they need to do some kind of ads. Maybe they have a physical store and they're going to push people to it, but there has to be some way to get traffic there, right? What is conversions on the website? Sometimes that's like, we need to purchase something and check out and all that. Great. That's a really easy conversion to measure. Sometimes it's brand awareness, which is a really hard thing to measure, you know? So I think knowing exactly what those things are makes a huge difference on it. And some people just don't think past the website by itself. Like, they think that's all encompassing, that does everything all in one, but it's just one piece of like marketing in general, you know?
Right.
So I think that's definitely hard for some people to grasp, especially people who are new to this or haven't done it before.
Yeah, and you know, I'm gonna expand on that a little bit. In that, like, you know, the clients that are unwilling to like really help you do your job too. I'm thinking of one of the most negative experiences was building a website for someone who they basically refused to give me any content, any copy. You know, I'm not a copywriter. I'm not great at it. And they also refused to hire someone because their budget was super low. So going back to that, so it's like, you know, you're at a standstill. And this was prior to you know, the change in how I invoice clients, but I sat on this for months waiting and just checking back in and saying, hey, like, literally just need a few paragraphs here, bud. And just nothing. I ended up having to basically link out, provide like a little bit of text from Wikipedia and link out to the article. And that was the content on probably the entire website. And then, you know, 6 months after launch, they get in contact with me and they're like, the website's not doing anything. We don't have any traffic. There's not any leads from it. And like, I just went back to the emails that I'd written them over the course of, you know, the development, which spanned way too long. And I was just like, look, like, every week I was asking you for these things. I was telling you that this isn't going to do anything if you don't put your effort in as well. And and then
surprise,
now it's happening. Surprise. Like,
yeah.
And like, these are the types of clients that we're trying to avoid and hopefully helping other people avoid as well.
Yeah. And I think like going through these lists, it's obviously not an exhaustive list. There was also some like really personal things where maybe you don't care if somebody types in all caps and it drives Matt nuts.
Right.
He'll send all his all caps clients to you. Just let him know.
Sure.
But I do think like I had thought about a lot of these things, and like coming up with the list wasn't hard because a lot of these things were in my mind, but it was a really helpful exercise to like write these down,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's a whole lot easier for you to spot these different flags, green, yellow, red, whatever they may be, if you know exactly what you're looking for. So if it's a really concrete answer, like I know if XYZ happens, then I don't want to move forward. And if you've pinpointed what that is, it's a whole lot easier to spot it in the wild when it happens, you know? So I would encourage people, you know, make a list of your flags too, and, you know, throw it in a Google Doc or something. But I think just the exercise of having to write those down is really handy. I would love it if you come into the admin bar and share some of yours. I know we're probably leaving off really obvious ones.
Absolutely.
We've talked about red flags so much, I could probably do 100 of them, but probably too much for this podcast episode. But we would definitely love to hear about that. But I do think, you know, I don't know, do you think it helped you going through and having to write all these down?
It absolutely did. I mean, I'm looking at the list now, and it makes me think also, like, really trust your gut on things. Like, your gut is very rarely wrong, and this just kind of reinforces that, like, that gut instinct that you have. And sometimes, you know, you're hungry for work, or you want to bend so that you can work with some clients. And if you do write it out and you're able to say, okay, this is a maybe, but then you have, you know, I have 5 red flags here from my list and only 2 green ones, just say no. Like, it's not worth it. There's always going to be more clients. Just trust that gut.
Yeah. And I've found anytime I was just hungry for the work, needed the money, you know, that kind of thing, and, and took on bad clients, the money thing never worked out. Like I
No.
ended up, you know, spending twice as long on it and not being able to do other things because I was already obligated. So it definitely is, that's a risky thing to do.
Right. I mean, imagine taking on, you know, smaller projects maybe, but 3 of them, and they've all got red flags. And now for a month or so, you're saddled with these 3, and sometime in between, you know, the beginning and the end of those projects, you get a dream client. But you don't have the time, you don't have the bandwidth. Like, what happens then? Like, do you say yes to that additional workload and just absolutely hate your life for a month or 2, or do you say no to these and trust your gut? And then that client that would have approached you anyway, now you have all the time in the world for them, and you can dedicate that much more, be that much more impressive to them, and build a lasting relationship with an actual great client.
Yeah. And I think the money thing is part of it. Like I just need the money. And I've definitely been in that place where I just need the money. And even now I'm like, oh man, I could really use some extra money. So maybe I should just do this. But you know, the other thing is sometimes I feel guilted into taking projects. Like this person really needs my help and it's not that hard and they seem really nice. And, you know, when you take on bad fit projects, you're really not doing that person any kind of favor because you're probably not putting all your effort into it. You know that these things aren't going to work out right. You really are better off having, you know, guide them to a solution you will think is better for them. Maybe that's a DIY solution. Maybe that's going to the admin bar job board and going through the directory and finding some people that you think are a better fit. But I don't think, even if you think you're doing something just to help somebody out, a lot of times you're not really doing them a favor because you're not going to be able to produce your best work. So I definitely have been in those situations.
I am for sure guilty of that, especially when they come to you and they're just like, they're so wholesome and they're so nice, and you just want to, like, you want to give them a hug and pat them on the back and say everything's going to be okay. But that's not your job, you know?
Yeah.
Like, your job is to do the best you can for a client, and like you said, most cases you're not going to be able to.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Like I said, I would love to hear any of your yellow, red, or green flags. So we'll have a dedicated thread to this podcast episode inside the group. If you want to get to the show notes, if there's anything we mentioned during this call that we'll link to, all that stuff will be in the show notes. You can go to theadminbar.com/podcast. And again, if you want to join our community, you can go to theadminbar.com/group. We would love to have you there. And we look forward to catching you on the next episode. We'll talk with you soon. Bye-bye.